from Sunshine and Flora. We are in the very last few days of 2021, and so I thought that this would be the perfect time to do a video recap of the 2021 growing season. Now, if you've been watching my videos throughout the year, you know that 2021 was my very first official year in growing cut flowers to sell at farmers markets. And boy, did I learn a lot, but that is an entire different video that I'm putting together. In this video, I just wanted to do kind of a recap of the growing year and show you how the garden changed, the high points, the low points, and a few things that I'm going to be changing for the 2022 growing season. So my 2021 cut flower season officially started way back in January when I started my first seeds. And the first seeds that I started were my Lizianthus seeds. Now, if you've grown Lizianthus before, you know that they grow super slow and they are pretty hard to grow. To be honest, last year was my very first year growing Lizianthus, and a few months before I started them from seed, I didn't even know what Lizianthus were. I saw them when I joined a flower farming group. I thought they were absolutely beautiful, and I thought, I'm gonna try and grow these. And I did, and I had success with one variety. A couple of the other varieties, I'm pretty sure it was my fault. But I started these way back on the second week of January. And I should mention this, what I'm referencing to make this video is my garden journal. If you guys don't keep a garden journal, I highly recommend it. Besides being helpful to make this video along with all of my YouTube footage, garden journals really help in preparing for your next growing season. I keep all of my seed starting dates in here when I plant everything outside. I even make notes on what I like, what I don't like. It's just super handy when I'm preparing for the next growing season. But anyway, that's what I'm using to reference for this video. So way back last year, the second week of January is when I started my Lizianthus. Now the next seeds that I started were on February 12th, and those were all of my snapdragons. And I found that my snapdragons were one of my favorite varieties to grow for my market bouquets. Last year I grew about 12 varieties. This year I am growing almost 20 varieties. And I had snapdragons blooming all the way through the end of the season. And so they will be a staple in my market bouquets throughout the years, I can see. Then right after that, on February 13th and 14th, I have noted that I started my Dahlias from seed. Now, I did plant dahlia tubers in the ground, but when I ordered the Flora Dahlia book, I received a packet of seeds from them that were for dahlias. And when you start dahlia seeds, you never know what you're gonna get, which is part of the excitement of it. So on February 13th and 14th, I started my dahlia seeds. I also had great success with those, as you'll see through this video. And then after that, I didn't start any other seeds until the third week of March. And on that week, I started my gomphrena, my asters, all of my celosia, a couple plants of lace flower, and a couple plants of cresspedia, which are also called billy buttons. Now, the lace flower and the billy buttons, I am not growing this year. I did not have success with those. Celosia, I am definitely growing. Asters, I'm growing, and I'm trying more varieties. And gomphrena, I am growing again, but not as many, because I found out I did not need as many plants as I started for those. The next seeds that I started were April 5th, and those were my straw flowers, calendula, my statice, rudbeckia, amaranth, and pincushion flowers. Now, out of those, I decided I am not growing any pincushion flowers this year. I'm gonna try amaranth again, just one variety though. I'm growing multiple varieties of rudbeckia. Straw flower, I'm gonna grow only 4 dried flowers. I'm growing a lot of statice, and calendula, I'm not gonna grow that for cut flowers. I'm just gonna use that out here in my vegetable garden for pollinators. Then the last seeds I started were on April 19th, and that was the dark opal basil, which was used for filler, and a few marigolds, which I ended up really liking those too. So then it was May, and it was time to plant. Now, our average last frost date can be anywhere from May 1st to May 15th. So last year, the first plants that I planted out on the garden were May 7th, and that were my Lizianthus and my snapdragons. Both of those can take a light frost, and they are not affected. The next things that I planted out in the garden were on May 18th, and that were Zinnias and Cosmos. Both of those were direct sowed. The day after that, I direct sowed some pro-cut sunflowers. Memorial weekend is when I planted all of my pumpkin seeds. And this year I have big plans for my pumpkin patch. I'm gonna grow a lot of small to medium-sized pumpkins that are all specialty, different varieties. That's gonna be really exciting. And then on June 1st was when I planted my first dahlia tubers in the ground. Now, I started out planting a few dahlia tubers in one area of the patch, but if you saw my videos, you saw I was doing a big pergola build, and so I couldn't plant the rest of my dahlias until almost the end of July, which I know is super, super late, so that will not be happening this year. But I did still get really nice blooms off of all of my plants. So now we're into June, and by June the garden was looking really good. Things were starting to grow. I was getting a few blooms here and there on some perennial daisies that I had. I was getting a few blooms on my snapdragons, but I actually did not do my first farmer's market until July 1st. So one of my goals for this year is to have flowers way before that. Now I have almost 2,000 tulip bulbs planted, so in May I should definitely be able to have a lot of tulips for sale. But one of my goals for this year is to have a lot of cut flowers by the end of June, hopefully mid-June. In our area, the farmers markets start up the first week of June, and those sometimes are the busiest markets of the year just because everyone is really excited. And so my goal this year is to have market bouquets the entire month of June. So stay tuned for my market plan on how I want to do that. But like I said, I did not start any farmers markets until July 1st, and they started off so great. I sold out pretty much every week of the markets, all the way from July all the way to the end of September. So it was absolutely fantastic, and I definitely learned right off the bat that I needed more flowers. So my plan for this year is to have about double of the flowers that I did last year. So throughout the entire month of July, the garden really was exploding, and I was getting a lot of really nice flowers for my market bouquets. I had snapdragons for my market bouquets, and I was also doing straight snapdragon bouquets that sold amazing. So I'll definitely be doing that this year as well. Perennial wise, I was using a lot of the daisies that I grew in the garden. I was also using my Perennial Echinacea in bouquets. Now I did realize at this point that I wish I would have grown a lot of filler. And so I was going out and foraging Queen Anne's lace and another wildflower to use for filler. And to be honest, that kind of saved my July market bouquets because I didn't have any zinnias at that point. I didn't have any sunflowers yet, and I did not have any dahlias because they were planted so late. And so by getting those fillers to fill in with the snapdragons and the heliopsis and the echinacea and anything else that I had, those helped immensely. Now August rolled around and the garden was completely exploding. So much to the fact that I actually ripped some of it out and replanted it. In the area in front of the greenhouse, I realized that I should not have planted calendula in that spot. I could have utilized it by planting something else there so much better. So I ripped that entire area out, and I had started some more zinnia seedlings, and I replanted that whole area with those zinnia seedlings. And that was a really great decision. So that's another area that I learned that I need to plant differently this next year. But the rest of the garden was completely exploding by August. By this time I had zinnias, I had celosia, I had gomphrena. I was getting multiple succession plantings of sunflowers that were blooming. And so August, I definitely had enough flowers to work with. By August, I also realized that I needed my entire garden just for cut flowers. Now, the last few years we have grown flowers and vegetables there. And one thing that I learned for 2022 is our vegetables just need to be in our home garden because I need that entire cut flower space just for my cut flowers. So that is one other major change that I'm making for 2022. At this point in the season, I also was being overtaken by weeds, as I'm sure you guys feel that way reaching into the end of summer. So this year, I think I'm going to try and plant everything in landscape fabric with the holes, which will also help me with plant spacing, but it will also help as a weed barrier. And I think that will be a good plan for me for this next year. So going from August to September, the garden was still absolutely exploding. The flowering plants that were cut and come again were producing like crazy. So I was cutting zinnias and celosia, and then they were flushing new blooms. My snapdragons I would cut and they would continue branching out, giving me more blooms. Everything was looking really, really good. And then I finally started getting some dahlias. And let me tell you, when I started making my market bouquets with the combination of the zinnias and the sunflowers and the dahlias, they looked absolutely amazing. There's just something about putting the dahlias in the market bouquets that like ups the ante. I don't know. But I definitely learned that the tubers need to get in the ground sooner. And you know, that was my own fault because we were doing the pergola build. So this year I will get those in on schedule, and I will have more dahlias earlier in the season. September in general was a really good month again for the farmers markets. Now I had that really big market the end of September. I think it was the third or fourth week in September, and it was the Made and Found Market Midwest. And that was the market that I did a 2-part video on, that I showed you my entire process of planning my booth, the bouquets, I showed you the market and everything. And that is the one where I completely sold out before the market was even half done. So that was a really good learning experience as well. I also plan to take a bunch of these small and medium sized specialty pumpkins that I'm growing to that market as well, because I think that would be an additional great seller. But overall, September was another fantastic month for the garden. Some of my plants were starting to taper off production wise, but the staples, like the Dahlias, celosia, zinnias, they were still producing, and I had planted an additional 5 to 6 succession plantings of sunflowers, and those were really producing as well too. So by the time I entered October, things were definitely slowing down in the garden. I think the last market bouquet sale that I had was probably the second week in October. I also did about 10 to 12 arrangements for our local Oktoberfest, which I think was the second weekend in October. So I was very fortunate that our frost held off, so I was able to get those additional sales that month. But once the frost hit, everything was done and it was time to clear the garden out. So once I got the garden cleared out, I did do a little bit of soil amending. I had to dig all of my dahlia tubers, which I cleaned on the spot. I cut them apart and sorted them and stored them away for the winter, which was quite a task. But I am really glad that I got all of that done. And if those make it through the winter, those will be a great holdover for next year's garden. So that brings me up to right now, which is the end of 2021. Next week we will be in 2022, and I am starting off 2022 right off the bat with the Flora online flower course, and I couldn't be more excited. Now, I already have been on my computer planning out my garden for next year. I've been marking my rows and flower beds, and I kind of have an idea of how it's going to be all laid out, but I'm sure once I take this flower course, a lot of those things and some of my plant spacing and varieties of flowers may change. So once I get the entire garden planned out, probably in the next couple months, I'll make sure to do a video on that. But as of right now, I am super excited about what is going to happen in the cut flower garden for 2022. And probably one of the first things I'll be doing for that is starting my Lizianthus seed all over again. That actually will happen in about a week, and this year I have 12 different varieties of Lizianthus that I'm going to be growing. I have a new method of planting for those because I quickly learned the way I did it last year. I wanted to make a few adjustments. So watch for an upcoming video on how I am growing my Lizianthus this year. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed seeing a recap of the whole entire 2021 garden year, and I can't wait to share how things go in 2022. We'll see you soon.